guys, Lawrence here from Tabletop Tactics, and by popular demand this is the Las Vegas Open Boxcast. So the wrap up of what happened at the event, which was not last weekend but the weekend before now as of filming this. And my goodness, it was an awesome amount of fun, as it always is. My third time going, and this time I had Beard come with me as well, and he took part in the championships tournament along with myself. He bought the Adeptus Sororitas, aka the Sisters of Battle, and I took an Aeldari, a couple of different detachments, which of course I will go over for you guys really shortly. Now sadly Beard couldn't be here with me today, so I'm not going to really be able to cover the games that he played, because obviously, guess what, I didn't play them. I was playing my own games. So what we're going to do is when Beard's next doing like a battle report, or he's next here in the studio, I'll get him to take some time and actually talk about the event as well, so we can see what happened with his side of things. So this Voxcast will just cover my 6 games that I played over the 2 days. First of all, of course, I should probably cover my list and just the overall experience of the LVO in general. So let's cover the list. That's coming up next. So it's list time. Now, as ever, I always like to take something a little bit different where possible, of course. It's not always possible. Sometimes you just have to take a really hard meta list. But in this instance, I wanted to do something with a different spin, you know, on a popular theme. So I did decide to go the Elder in the end. But the funny thing was, I wasn't going to take Elder. And in fact, I only changed my mind 3 days, no, it was 4 days, forgive me, before the event, because I don't want to reveal too much, because now the army that I was going to take, I'm going to save. I'm going to keep it up my sleeve, and I'm going to, I'll take that to the, at the moment, unless a new codex like i.e. my beloved Drakari come out before then, but I want to take it to the Games Workshop Grand Finals, because obviously I was lucky enough to win Heat 1, so I'll definitely be going to the finals. So I want to keep this other army secret. I won't go over, I won't bore you guys with that now. I'll keep it secret. All I will say is it's nothing you've ever seen before. It's been one of my secret projects I've been working on for a while now, and it is nearly finished. And I didn't take it in the end, which I think ultimately was a mistake, funnily enough. But I didn't know that at the time, because there was an external factor, which I won't tell you about because it will give away what I was going to take. So, right, let's go over what I did take, why I took it. And I thought, look, let's do this. Let's have a different spin on the Elder Army. Right now, competitively speaking, Elder armies are rife with Reapers. Loads and loads of Reapers. All you see is Reapers everywhere, you know. And there's a reason for that. They're really, really good. And in the meta with consistent -1s, -2s to hit, you know, depending on what you're facing, etc., flyers or whatever, you know, the ignoring the negative to hit is a really, really powerful tool, guys. And there's no denying that Reapers are really good. Now, there's a couple of reasons I didn't take Reapers. First of all, I do own Reapers, but I didn't have them painted, and when I changed my mind to take the Elder, I didn't have enough time to paint them, even if I wanted to. But I didn't want to take the Reapers. Didn't want to take them. I feel strongly that Elder can work without Reapers. Okay, so what I did do is resurrected some of my ghosts, which, to be fair, I've actually been working on for quite some time now. You haven't seen all of the army, another one of my secret projects. And I used the Ulthway contingent, so I've got a pretty large Ulthway army to go with them. Now, before you say, Lawrence, Ulthway, are you crazy? Everything has to be a Latok or Samhain, you know. Actually, Ulthway are one of the hidden gems, or more specifically, Ulthway complements them really well, but Guardians, in my opinion, are one of the really, really, really powerful units in the Elder Codex, which are just overlooked and replaced often with Rangers, right? So you go minimum units of Rangers to help with your screening and board control, which I won't go over to here. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're probably a tournament player yourselves or relatively experienced at 40k. But they're using the Rangers to screen and protect, create drop zones if you like, and then they'll put their Reapers either in the webway as 2 units, or more often than not, they'll put them in wave serpents, have quite a few minimum units and 1 big unit, and then use someone like Ivrain, aka the cat lady, to do a soul burst on them, because there'll be a Aeldari detachment, meaning that they can fire effectively twice with this big 10-man blob, once in the psychic phase, once in the shooting phase, etc, etc. So, you know, that's kind of the recipe and the recurring theme, if you like, that a lot of competitive Elder armies are being built around at the moment. I didn't want to do that, you know, it's boring, because if you do the same thing and then you end up facing the same army, it becomes a bit boring, right? So it's always cool to do something a bit different. And also, you should really, when you go to these events, build an army which you think would beat the meta list, right? You need to build an army which, you know, you'd be confident that you could beat, rather than taking the same army and then it becomes like a bit of a luck-based thing, right? So what I did is I did take the Elder, and I did take an all-the-way detachment. So let's go over the first detachment. It's a battalion detachment. I took Eldrad Ulthran because he's an absolute monster, and quite frankly, you know, he's still cheaper than 2 Farseers and still allows me to cast 3 powers, and he's tougher as well. He's got a 3-up invulnerable save, plus he gets the +1 to cast after he's cast his first power. He was an easy choice for me to make. He's not the Warlord in this instance, but that's what I took. I then took the Autarch from Ghostmaker. I have to have my narrative spin. I took the Autarch Aeon Seul. So a couple of reasons to take this guy. One, I wanted the Autarch as the Warlord, because the Path of Command ability to potentially regain command points in combination with the Fate Reader Warlord trait, which is an all-the-way only Warlord trait, actually gives you a fair chance to regain command points. Now, funnily enough, on day 1, they pretty much, I was rolling 6s for days. A lot of my command points did actually come back. I was getting them back. On day 2, in all 3 of my games, I didn't get a single command point back. You know, this is the way it goes sometimes. You have to roll 6s, guys, for them to come back. But you know that they do come up, right? Especially with me, I have a knack of rolling 6s. But look, that's what I took. Autarch was the Warlord. He was on foot, had a Starglaive. That was his thing. You know, generally he was there as a bubble to give reroll 1s to hit, etc., and just to provide that Warlord trait. I then had a Warlock, Isha Imraya, who's currently a Farseer in Ghostmaker, but I picture this as like taking place about 100 years before the events of Ghostmaker. So that was the narrative going on in my head anyway. So, so Isha Imraya was there as a Warlock, in training, apprenticed to Eldrad Ulthran before she became a Farseer. But she had a pivotal role in terms of the competitive synergy of this list. I gave her the Protect power, which basically gives you a +1 to your saves, and became rather critical in many of the games that I played, because it has great synergy with the Guardians, as I will sort of explain to you as we cover those. So those were the 3 HQ in the battalion. Then I took 3 blobs, big blobs of 20 Guardians. No, I'm not crazy. So 3 blobs of 20 Guardians. Now these are all the way. So look, you could make them a Latok, absolutely, and then you'd be benefiting from that -1 to hit. But frankly, you know, I don't think you need it. And also, you're not getting that -1 to hit if someone gets into combat with you and so forth. And what I ended up doing the majority of the time was screening with 1 unit of Guardians, and then the other 2 blobs. And in fact, I did do it in every game. I thought there were some games where maybe I wouldn't, but it just turned out with the types of armies I faced, I did do it in every game. I put the 2 big blobs of Guardians in the webway. So I deep struck them in, okay? Now, the 2 blobs that deep struck in would generally have 2 heavy weapon platforms with shuriken cannons, and the blob on foot, the screening blob, which, you know, usually would get mulched by charging units or a cultist bomb or whatever, that would just have 1 platform. I would have liked to have taken 2, but I couldn't afford it in the list. And they were just shuriken cannons, you know, shuriken cannons still all right, 3 strength 6 shots, -3 on the roll of a 6 to wound. But the real reason you're taking a shuriken cannon, because you are still paying 15 points each for it, is there's a little trick you can do with Guardian blobs, which actually helps keep them even more resilient. And really, to be honest, just every single game I won was because of these Guardians. So I know I'm waving the Guardian flag now, but I wanted to relay my experience with the Elder, because now that I've got Ghostmaker out, the first episode, my Elder are going to be back on the channel in a big way. So you'll start seeing a lot of Elder battle reports very shortly here. So for you Elder fans, you should be happy with that. But I really want to show you guys and highlight just how good the Guardians are, and just show some different ways to play the Elder, right? Because you don't want to see the same thing again and again. So with the Elder Guardians, the trick is this, is that if you get first turn, you're generally going to use Protect on your Warlock, cast it on your Guardians. What you do is whenever you take fire from the Guardians, this is the beauty of it, the platforms are remarkably irritating. So they're 2 wounds, okay, and they've actually got a 3-up save. But if you cast Protect on them, they've actually got a 2-up save. You've then got the Celestial Shield stratagem, which gives you a 4+ invulnerable save against shooting. That's really good. Then all of a sudden it becomes a 3-up, right, if you've put Protect on there. This makes these Guardians extremely tricky to shift, because if someone starts shooting at you with a load of small arms fire, which inevitably they will, you know, to try and get rid of your Guardian blob, you go, great, I'll take those shots on the Guardian platform. All of a sudden you're rocking a 2-up save, or if it's an assault cannons, you're still getting 3-up save, you know, and they have to get through those 2 wounds. So if you've got 2 platforms, there's 4 wounds they have to get through before they've even started removing Guardians yet. So all of a sudden, the blob is not as weak as it first appears. It can actually be pretty tough. And this tactic worked again and again and again, as I'll talk about in the games, as I cover those in detail in just a moment. So that's how the Guardians worked. Now, the 2 blobs that Deep struck in, these guys were amazing. And, you know, when you're combining it with things like Guide, Doom, so what I'd do is I'd guide 1 unit, you doom the target you wanted to kill, you know, Primarch, Blob, whatever you want. You know, they're even good against vehicles. They're good against almost everything. Toughness 8 is probably where they struggle the most, but even then, if you've doomed it, because the 6s become a -3 rend, it's still good, and the doom's allowing you to re-roll, right? So the Guardian Blob, if you're firing 2 with 2 Shuriken Cannons, which is 6 shots, and you've got 18 Shuriken Catapults, and they're all Assault 2 weapons, right? So this is a lot of shots here. It's a lot of shots, right? So what you do is you guide 1 unit, and then this is the other key reason why I have to take Ulthway for it to work, in my opinion, the best way it possibly can, is you take Discipline of the Black Guardians on the other blob, and then what you get is a +1 to hit with that unit, and then the other one's re-rolling to hit. So basically both units become pretty deadly accurate then, you know, against anything. And then when you're dooming that target, frankly, I was killing Primarchs, I was killing Cultist Blobs, I was killing Plague Bearers, you know, whatever you faced, it was gone. You know, it was just removed from the board. Now, obviously, you need to Psychic Synergy as well to, you know, to amp it up to superpower levels. But my goodness, did it work really effectively. Now, I have actually filmed a Tactica Battle Reports over on the on demand on the website. If you're watching this on the website, you can just go over there. If you're watching this on YouTube, go check it out on the website. Where I actually use my LVO Elder list, and it's a really good game because it really demonstrates how powerful Guardians actually are and how they can work. So that should be released, well, within 24 hours of this video. I'm not sure which one will get released first, the Vox Castle or Tactical Bat Rep, but they're both pretty much being released back to back. So go check that out if you're interested to see how the army works. But I digress. That was the core sort of synergy of the army. All right, so 3 blobs of Guardians. 1 was used to screen the characters and so forth, and then the three characters from the Ulthway Battalion. Next up, we had 2 other detachments. We had a Spearhead, or sorry, forgive me, an Outrider detachment, always get them mixed up, so the fast attack one, and I had an Air Superiority detachment. Now, these 2 detachments were a LATOC, okay, and I used the ghosts, my painted ghosts. You should, if I've got pictures of them, I'll put them up on the screen for you whilst I'm talking about this, guys. But the Air Superiority detachment was 3 Hemlock Wraith Fighters. Now, again, not a controversial choice, but a choice which you wouldn't see over Reapers, right? Which is perfectly understandable. And if you wanted to run the Reaper list, you still could with the Guardians, and you drop the Hemlocks, right? Because they're doing a similar job. But there's a couple of reasons why I took the Hemlocks over the Reapers. For a start, any savvy tournament player would build a list to take on Reapers, right? To expect to face Reapers. And Reaper's strength is 8. Okay, so what you're seeing or what you're starting to see, is a lot of very high toughness fortifications to protect alpha units, and Reapers will struggle against those higher toughness targets. Now, of course, if they get doomed, that's great, but then generally you might start to see some psychic defense to try and shut down the doom, whatever it may be. So people are starting to think a little bit more about Reapers. Also, the fact that they're -2 does mean that if there is a really high toughness target and it's got a great armor save, that the Reapers aren't getting as much damage output as they normally would. Now, the majority of the meta is still below toughness 8. It's tough, it's toughness 7 or below. But Reapers will start to struggle against things like a toughness 9, these big fortifications and so forth. So that's something to consider. Hemlocks have no issue with that. They're strength 12. They're flat damage 2, which isn't as good as a Reaper, of course. I'm not even trying to justify that. But the auto hitting is as good as the Reaper. Sadly, of course, you can't Ynnari them to do a soul burst and everything because they're a vehicle. But for me, the Hemlocks had another critical synergy, if you like, with this particular style army, which for me edged it over the Reapers anyway. I was happy I took the Hemlocks, and actually the Hemlocks performed even better than I hoped they would. So what I did is took 3 Hemlocks and I gave 2 of them Jinx, which is a Warlock power, because don't forget, these guys are full Psychers as well. And 1 had Horrify. Now, what the Hemlocks provide is a -2 leadership bubble. Okay, they don't stack with each other, but they give a -2 leadership to enemy units within 12 inches. Horrify gives an additional -1. Now, what you can do is you can actually catch a lot of people off guard by forcing morale checks, which normally they wouldn't even consider is an issue. So for example, and I did this, Nurgling bases, there's 3 units of Nurglings. I only need to kill 1, and I can say, actually, yeah, you do need to take a morale check because your leadership now is so low, depending on whether I put Horrify on it, but even if I didn't, it becomes leadership 5, right? Because Nurgling's leadership 7, as I recall. So now all of a sudden they're leadership 5, I've killed 1, morale actually is an issue. They have to take the morale check. If I put Horrify on it, they have to take another morale check. It's an even harder morale check. So, that synergy there, I was removing obliterators using this tactic, which you'll find out in game 1, was really, really powerful. The other thing which is critical to go in hand with my Guardians and make the army work as a whole is I cast Jinx on alpha targets. Now, for those of you that don't know what Jinx does, is Jinx gives you a -1 to your save. Any save, it's just -1 to your save. So if they're taking an invuln save, it's a -1, okay? So all of a sudden, Mortarian's not a 4-up invuln, he's a 5-up invuln. It makes a huge difference when you're firing a big Guardian blob, which, don't forget, on 6s is a -3 to the save, so effectively becomes a -4, or if they've got an invuln, like Mortarian, for example, it becomes a 5-up invuln. It's huge, guys. It's absolutely huge. And the Hemlocks have the ability to deliver that psychic power where I need it, because with Wings of Cain, they can move and then they can turn after they move. They're a very flexible unit in terms of speed. The other thing as well, and I know that this is one of the reasons where people sort of stepped away from Flyers, although I did see quite a few at the LVO, Flyers that is, not Hemlocks. But the other reason people stepped away is because of the boots on the ground rule. But this is the difference with the ITC missions. The ITC missions, boots on the ground isn't as much of a nerf, in my opinion, as it is in a regular game of 40k. Because the way that you score points in the ITC missions is each play around, did you destroy a unit? Did you hold an objective? Okay, so the Hemlock can't, it can't hold an objective. That's one thing it can't do. But it can quite comfortably destroy a unit, especially 2 of them. So you almost always get that unit kill, even if it's a really tough army that you're facing. Second, they really, really do help towards the bonus points, the secondary points of the ITC. So for example, Recon, which I picked in pretty much every mission, it was very easy for me to have a Hemlock in 3 corners, in 3 of the quarters of the board, and then I'd have my own sort of castle base, which would be the other quarter. So I was very easily getting those secondary points. And most people would tend to ignore the Hemlocks first because they had to deal with all of the Guardian blobs and everything else that I took in the army. So the Hemlocks did incredibly well. Very fast unit. Very powerful unit. The psychic synergy that worked with the rest of my army was really ace. The only regret that I have was that they weren't Orthway. And I would love to have taken them as Orthway, because I actually have 3 Orthway Hemlocks, and just for the theme of the army, and just keep it all the same, because that's how I like to roll. But the reality is that them being a late dock is much, much better, because the -2 to hit is savage. And sadly, the Orthway craft world ability doesn't do anything on a Hemlock, which is a real shame. I think, you know, they should really, because Hemlock's really themed. It's very, very fluffy for Orthway, because they're warlocks in, you know, they're warlocks in these flyers, and Orthway has lots of warlocks and farseers, but their Spirit Stone ability is the exact same as the Orthway trait, and it specifically states that you can't use both, so it is what it is. So if I took them as Orthway, I'd get no bonus. If I took them as a Laytok, -2 to hit, it was a no-brainer, right? So I took them as a Laytok. The next attachment was also a Laytok. Now, you could have run this as Samhain, could have, which would have been good, synergized well with stratagems and so forth. But ultimately, I took them as a Laytok. I'm pretty happy with that choice, you know. Samhain would have worked, but for a start, they were painted white, just like my 3 flyers were, and I didn't want to really create any confusion for my opponents, right? You know, I wanted to keep everything the same, so all the white stuff is a Laytok, all of the black stuff is Orthway. That was quite an easy way of doing it. So what I did is I took this Outrider detachment, I took a single Warlock on Jetbike. Now, if I'd had the time, I would have painted Yvraine, the cat lady, okay? And I would have done this as a Ynnari detachment, and that would have actually been better. But to be honest, guys, I just didn't have the time to paint her up. Obviously, as I said, I made the decision to change the army quite late, and I didn't have time to paint her up as well as complete my Shining Spears, which is what I took. 3 units of 5 Shining Spears, absolutely incredible units. Provided really, really, really good, but also very important counterpunch. This army needed some sort of combat defense, and I think a lot of competitive armies in 40k do these days, because there are things like Bloodletter bombs and Blood Angels and big assault bombs, let's just call them assault bombs as a generic term here, will drop in, get into your lines and absolutely ruin your day. So in summary, the Shining Spears made a great counterattack unit, really, really good at countering those assault bombs, but also going out, hitting these little camping units which are camping on objectives, because in the ITC Championships missions, the objectives are pretty much, for the most part, predetermined, so they're set up in a certain way, generally centrally around the board, so that whatever the deployment map is that you roll, it's kind of even, any side, no one gets you know, too much of an unfair advantage, generally speaking. You know, it's not always the case, but generally speaking. And what will happen is that these camping units get deployed on there like Rangers or Nurglings, which is what we saw a lot of. And the Shining Spears are great at getting out there, because they move 16 inches, which is amazing, and doing the first turn charge against them and actually wiping them out. And generally, if you kill a couple of these camping units, it's good, because you want quite a few kills every turn, because you want to try and get the bonus end of battle round bonus point of having more kills than your opponent to get another point, which is always important, right? So Shining Spears are amazing. Now, if I had Yvraine and I had the time to paint her, and it was a Ynnari detachment, they would have been amazing, because then I would have done the Soul Burst, which would have been really, really good. So they would have moved twice or charged another unit, or, you know, whatever it may be that they would do. As it turned out, it wasn't like a complete deal breaker for my list. I didn't have her, because my trick was on the Warlock Skyrunners, I would take Quickening, which allows them to move again anyway. Okay, so you cast that power, they move again. By that point, they've moved 32 inches, you know. That's pretty much anywhere I need to be for a first turn charge anyway. But I think ultimately, of course, the Ynnari would edge it, because it gives them more options as a Soul Burst later on for that second round of combat or whatever it may be. Also, if you were to run it as Ynnari, you'd realistically want one larger blob of Shining Spears. You probably do 2 blobs of 9, but then you'd have some issues with getting that third fast attack, and you'd have to skim some points around. It can work, and I'll probably talk to you, well, now that I've pretty much covered my other list, I'll probably talk to you about what I would have taken differently now. So that's coming up next. However, I'm going to be a spider here, I'm going to be a Dark Elder Archon, and lie in my previous statements. I'm not going to tell you what I'd change about the Elder list first, because I think it's better I give you the context of the actual games that I played and what my overall takeaway was playing the ITC format this year, because it was different to last year, right? And then explain what I would take differently, because then you've got the context and that makes a lot more sense. So, so what we're going to do is go over my 6 games that I played. LVO, first of all, I should just do a massive shout out to the Frontline Gaming team. You know, it's an amazing hub in terms of hobby and, you know, competitive play. Not just 40k, but Age of Sigmar, War Machine, you know, the whole shebang is there. And it's an amazing atmosphere. The whole convention stands that are going on, you know, folks selling their wares and meeting lots of different people and seeing different things which, you know, I hadn't even seen before. You know, good conversion kits and all this sort of jazz was really, really good fun. Plus, you get to hang out with some really cool dudes. You know, got to speak to PT Pad from Chapter Tactics, who's part of the Frontline crew. Simon, who's joining in now, who I didn't get to hang out with enough, but next year we'll get a game. Feel No Pain Wargamers, who I was hanging out with. Mini Wargaming, Dave. Tabletop Minions, at Minions Atom. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. Go check him out. I met him for the first time. Really, really great guy. Again, didn't get to hang out enough. The time goes so quickly there. But look, it's a great place to be. I highly recommend it. And, you know, hopefully I should return next year. Maybe the Bone says he wants to come with me, so that'll be a lot of fun. So, you know, hopefully if you guys are thinking about going, you know, get the old piggy bank out, put the pennies in, save up for wherever you are in the world and get out to the Las Vegas Open. So it is really, really good fun. But here we go. This is what happened. 6 games over 2 days. So 3 games for day 1, 3 games day 2, and then if you are very, very lucky and very, very skilled, you can get into the top 8, and then you play another 3 games on the Sunday, and then ultimately the winner of that gets crowned the LVO champion, and then sometimes, although not always, potentially the overall ITC champion as well, which is really, really cool. So I can't remember, so you forgive me for this, guys. Can't remember the names of everyone I played, and I was so time pressured, like I didn't have time to write everything down. So what I've done in this particular Voxcast, and I hope you guys are okay with it, is I took a photo before the game and I took a photo after the game. I tried to take as many photos as I could. I'll flash them up on the screen here, you know, where possible or as appropriate. But there was absolutely no way that I had the time to film during the deployment, because with 8th edition now, don't forget you've got that alternating deployment, right? So you're constantly active. You know, what I used to do before is try and sneak it in whilst they were deploying, so I didn't take up any time. You must be respectful to your opponent and the time that you know, you're taking. So I didn't even attempt it. You know, I just took a photo, snap, and beginning at the beginning and the end of the game, and I thought that was the fairest way to do it. So let's go over the games. So game 1. Played a Chaos Soup list. Now this was a very recurring theme at the LVO. I saw a lot of Chaos Soup lists. For those of you guys that don't know what I mean by that, specifically is a Chaos army which is made up of different faction detachments. So you might have a Death Guard here, you might have Chaos Space Marines Alpha Legion here, you might have demons there, okay? So the point is they're mixing the things up to get the best synergy, which is absolutely what you should do at something like the LVO. To compete with it, right? And I played the Chaos Soup list first game, and this was an interesting LVO actually, because I think even more so than my previous LVOs, I think all 6 of these games were super tough lists. Like last year when I took the Reaver Span, I had a couple of the early games. The players were really experienced. I found generally at the LVO the players are very good, but their lists were kind of like a mismatch, and like I had the speed to take the objectives, you know, quickly, so it was just one of those things. Sometimes you get like a mismatch, bit of a rock, paper, scissors scenario, which happened a lot more in 7th edition, to be fair, in my opinion, than it does in 8th. But yeah, this year I didn't have that. Like all of the armies were really, really strong. I'm sure you'll agree as we go over them. But right, list 1. So he had, I think it was 3 detachments, guys. It may have only been 2, so forgive me for that. But I can pretty much remember what was in the army. So he had a super heavy auxiliary detachment, I should have a photo coming up showing what the deployment was like. And that was, of course, Death Guard, and it was, of course, Mortarion. So Mortarion's still a pretty popular choice. I did see a fair few of him around, hanging around at the LVO. He's not unkillable, you know, even when he has first turn, he's able to power up. But he is still a problem, you know. He's kind of needs to be dealt with, right? If someone does drop Mortarion on you, and this guy did the absolute right thing. He had a Heretic Astartes Sorcerer in there because he had a Chaos Space Marine detachment, and that Sorcerer had Feel No Pain power, a Slaanesh one. But of course he also had Warp Time, which is critical because guess who that goes on? Mortarion, so he can move twice and do, you know, turn 1 charge and all that jazz, and make him really, really good. So he had Chaos Space Marine detachment, as I've said. This was an Alpha Legion detachment. And this, I should now probably take a bit of time to highlight the tactics that he used here. He took a 40-man cultist bomb. So a cultist bomb is very, very popular on the competitive scene at the moment, mainly because it's got a ton of shots. It's got 80 shots. It can be made very accurate with Prescience cast on it, which is what the other power was that the Sorcerer had. I think he had 2 Sorcerers, actually. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. He had 2 Sorcerers. At least I think so. He did have Prescience, I'm sure of it. So he cast Prescience on there. And what that means is they're hitting a lot more accurately, but more importantly, being Alpha Legion, they've got a -1 to hit, and they've got the Forward Operatives Stratagem. Now, what that allows you to do is appear 9 inches away from the enemy units, okay, from any enemy units. So kind of like a deep strike, right? Now, you might think on paper, you know, if you're already a tournament player, you know what I'm talking about. But assuming you guys are just perhaps interested in what people are taking competitively at the moment, especially chaos-wise, this cultist bomb can pretty much appear where you need it to be, and then if it needs to be warp times to move again to get into that rapid fire range, that can happen as well, because usually a sorcerer with jump pack will come down behind them as well to help buff them up. But they can put these 80 shots in, and then they get Veterans of the Long War applied to them. Now, all of a sudden, even though those strength 3 auto guns, you know, they're only strength 3, where they were wounding toughness 6+ things before on 6s, now they're wounding them on 5s. And that becomes a real problem, right? That becomes a real problem. So I've got 80 shots coming at you, and that is really, really prevalent in 8th edition now, having this weight of dice. It's really critical to remove enemy hordes, but even powerful things. You know, when you're rocking 80 dice, you know, it's mathematics, guys. You're going to drop even the more powerful things because it's just the amount of wounds and saves that you're forced them to take. And then it becomes doubly powerful because they give them the Mark of Slaanesh, and then they use a stratagem called Endless Cacophony, and then the blob fires again. Okay, so it's not 80 shots anymore. It's twice that, right? So all of a sudden you can get an idea of how vicious this can be, because it literally forcing, you know, handfuls of saves from your opponent, just forcing them to remove lots of models. So really, really powerful units, pretty much a must-have in a competitive chaos list, and this guy did the exact right thing. He had that, right? So he then had a couple of units of 10-man cultists, and that was just to help fulfill the battalion. He then took 3 units of obliterators. Now, obliterators, you know, a fantastic unit, good firepower, you know, 12 shots, with potentially up to I think the strength 6, 7, 8, yeah, potentially up to strength 9, with a -3 in damage 3, depending on what you roll, because it's all random, right? But even at their minimum value, they're still very good. Now again, he had Mark of Slaanesh on them, so he had the flexibility then to go, well, I don't need to fire my cultists again this turn, like I've already destroyed their screening or whatever. Now I'll actually fire my obliterators again. So, you know, he's got the flexibility to do that, right? And again, it's very powerful. And usually a sorcerer will come down with them as well, just to help buff them and so forth. So all of a sudden, you know, you're dealing with a pretty nasty army here. You know, he's got the great anti-infantry horde clearance firepower. He's got great anti-tank. He's got Mortarion. You know, this is the business. Now, we did have a couple of other units in there. I think one of them was a demon unit. In fact, I've just remembered, in fact it was, and this leads me to my second tale for you guys, the Bloodletter Bomb was there. I had a feeling we'd see a few of them, but you know, maybe not as many as we might see in future tournaments, because the Chaos Demons Codex had only come out like a week and a half before, right? So for those people that didn't have Bloodletters already, it was going to be a hard push to get them ready in time. So what is the Bloodletter Bomb, Lawrence? Well, let me break it down for you. Well, it's 30 Bloodletters. He has an icon in the Bloodletters. He's obviously got the champion, you have to take that, and he's got a musician. The musician gives a +1 inch to the charge. Now there's a stratagem in the Demons Codex that you can use before the game on your Bloodletter icon, and he switches it out and he gets basically a better icon, and he can charge 3d6 inches once per game. So all of a sudden, when you're dropping in 9 inches away, and you know you're getting a +1 because of the musician, so you only need an 8-inch charge to make it into whatever you want to. When you're rolling 3d6, the average is you make that charge, okay? And Bloodletters on the charge are no joke, guys, okay? I'm not going to go over all their rules now. I'm not going to, you know, force feed you here, but they pretty much kill whatever they charge. You know, not everything, but most infantry-based units they will kill. And even against, well, even against some large, really nasty units, because they're so strong on the charge, and then depending if you do have heralds to help buff them up further, they're absolutely brutal, okay? Absolutely brutal with their -3 weapons and their good strength and loads of attacks. They're really, really good. So look, he had a Bloodletter Bomb, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a Cultist Bomb, a Bloodletter Bomb, Mortarion, 3 units of Obliterators. This is no joke. This is a good list, guys. So how did it go? Well, it did go pretty well for me. We did only get 2 turns, sadly. We didn't get to play beyond 2 turns. A couple of reasons for this. One, we're both using high model count armies. There's assault phases in there, but I'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, after all of the games. But it was fair to say, absolutely fair to say, by the end of the game, that even if the game had gone on, there wasn't really a chance for him to make a comeback. What ended up happening was I seized the initiative. Okay, so I actually finished dropping first, lost the roll off to go first, despite the +1, and then I rolled a 6, didn't I? That's what happened. What happened then? Well, I should have some pictures up here on the screen. You can see that he screened his army quite well, created sort of a drop zone. He actually had a Demon Prince in there as well, in his army, as I recall now as well. Demon Prince of Khorne. Sorry, I can't remember everything, guys, but trust me, it was a nasty army. And yes, of course, he did have that because that was part of his Demons detachment with the Bloodletters, right? But regardless, I seized the initiative. I deep struck in with the 2 Guardian Blobs. I doomed Mortarion. I actually managed to successfully jinx him as well with the Hemlock, and absolutely obliterated him with Guardian Firepower, obliterated a whole bunch of cultists. Now, he had his Cultist Bomb suddenly appear in the next turn. I didn't actually quite finish killing Mortarion on the first turn. He had something silly, like 2 wounds left. But he came back in, counter-struck with his Cultist Bomb, removed one of my Guardian units, and then I moved up with my other Guardian unit in the next turn, removed his Cultist unit, and the Shining Spears charge finished them off. Hemlocks flew around in my second turn. We finished off Mortarion. Basically, by the end of turn 2, I'd killed Mortarion, I'd killed all of the cultists, and his Bloodletter Bomb came in, tried to come in behind my enemy lines, but the way I'd screened, he couldn't really get to any of the characters. I actually wiped out all of his Bloodletters as well. So by turn 2, he'd lost all of his cultists, all of his Bloodletters, and he had lost 1 unit of Obliterators who had come down and destroyed one of the Hemlocks and one of the Shining Spear units. So at that point, he didn't have enough units left on the boards to come out and take the objectives. I was all mid-boards, all over the objectives. So I forget the exact score that I won by, but it was something like 16 points to 12 or something like that, or 16 points to 8, something like that. So I took the game. So it was, you know, it was a pretty good victory against, you know, a really strong list. I was happy with how it went. I think if he had gone first, you know, would it have been very different? Yeah, maybe. I mean, his Oblits would have come down. I think they still would have destroyed, well, let's say he got lucky and destroyed 2 Hemlocks. Why not? Mortarion, because we actually were playing a hammer and anvil deployment, Mortarion was still, I think, too far back with the way I deployed to get the first turn charge, certainly against anything significant anyway, other than my little Guardian screen, and I still would have then countered with my two blobs. So yeah, I think we still could have had a chance of taking it if we didn't go first, which is good, which is what you want. You don't want to have to lose the game on not going first, right? So, you know, overall, that was the first game of day one. I was pretty happy with that. Let's go over game two coming up next. So, game two. Played an absolute boss, Genestealer Cult army. And we had a really fun game, actually. It was really good. And also, he taught me a lot. This was my first time that I was sort of stung, if you like, by my lack of knowledge around the new ITC Championships missions, which I'll go into probably more at the end of this. But it was that proved to me at that point, I was like, right, I'm not experienced enough in this format to do it the justice that I wanted to do. So that was kind of like, let's call it my first alarm bell, if you like. So I played Genestealer Cult. And we had good banter, it was a good laugh, and he caught me a couple of times with the ruins rules, because in the ITC, what they do is they've got lovely terrain. All of the boards there, you know, they did a great job in getting good terrain on the boards. You know, you had lots of interesting terrain and, you know, some cover and stuff, which was good. But they have a specific rule that if it's a ruin and you're on the ground floor of the ruin, that you are completely out of line of sight, okay? So ground floors on ruins block line of sight. Now, that's even if you can see them, right? So, so even if like there's big holes in the walls, if you're on the ground floor of that ruin, you're out of line of sight. So look, that's fair enough. Now, I remembered reading this vaguely at one point. So, you know, I was kind of vaguely aware of that, but where I got caught further was if you're in it, you can't see out either. It just blocks line of sight. And I don't think I'd really registered that. So I actually ended up deploying a unit, one of my Guardian blobs here, in one of the corner ruins. And I couldn't see out to shoot. But as per the 40k rules, you don't need line of sight to charge. So this was actually something that's really favoured like assault armies, which is actually quite cool, and there's nothing wrong with it. It was my own lack of preparation to be prepared for it. So I think in a way I made a mistake there. I don't think I didn't have too many options to deploy that differently, but certainly I should have moved out instead of, you know, previously before shooting when it came up in my turn, right? So I sort of missed out on shooting with like one Guardian blob, and I learned a lot that game. It was really cool, and he was a great guy. You know, we did have a really good time. It was really fun. And what happened was he was running the Genestealer Cult. Now he's got a whole bunch of these acolytes. It's a good army, you know. Genestealer Cults. There was quite a few there that I saw. Basically, the army works by having these guys ambush you using the new stratagem and icon from chapter approved, etc. And they can do a first turn charge, because if they roll a 6, they roll 3d6. If they roll a 6, this big blob can move again, and they can, so instead of being 9 inches away from you, all of a sudden they're only a couple of inches away. They can get first turn charges off, not easily, but relatively easily, because if you're rolling 3d6, you've got a fair chance of a 6 popping up. And when you're doing it across 3 big blob units, it comes up. So in summary, we had quite a few turns. I think we actually did get to turn 4. This was the longest game that I had, and it was a tough game. You know, it was a tough game. It was really hard fought. He got first turn. I didn't seize the initiative. He did get his first turn charges off with his blobs. He's wiped out Guardian blobs. Now again, I tried to use my Shining Spears. What he would do is, because this board was really good for him, he had a few buildings in the middle of the board where he was able to run up with his Kraken detachment of Genestealers. So he's got Genestealer Cults and he's got Kraken detachment of Genestealers. So it's a really good, well-optimized Tyranids Genestealer Cult hybrid. Very fast, really in your face with the assaults. We rolled up the Dawn of War deployment, which is, you know, even better for him. And he was able to move up with these Genestealers hide them in the middle of the boards where the objectives were. And because they're inside the ground floor of these ruins, which are right next to the objectives, I can't shoot them. And I can't really go near them because he doesn't need line of sight to come out and charge me. And so again, this is like where I was like, that's very interesting. You know, this is something which I'm going to have to really consider, right? So it was good. He went forward. He's taking objectives. It was a tight game. In fact, the score in the end, I've got it here. I took 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I did get 20 points in this game. He got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 points by the looks of it. 15 points. So we racked up quite a few points, which is quite cool. I can see actually, yeah, we did 3 turns. We got to turn 3 in this game. So that was the longest game that I got to, longest turn length that I got to. And look, it was tough because what happened was when my Guardian Blobs came in, because I deep struck them again, right? And I used my Shining Spears to help counterattack. I pretty much neutered all of his hybrids, his acolytes when they came in. You know, the big blob would come in, it would kill like a screening unit or whatever, and then I'd come in and shoot it, and I would remove it. You know, I had the firepower to absolutely deal with it, whereas I think a traditional Reaper spam list actually probably wouldn't have. You know, even though I know that they've got the big blob doing 2 shots each, but when you're dealing with 90 models, you know, 3 blobs of 30, it's tough, plus the gene stealers, right? So I was really happy with how my list performed, despite being caught off guard with the terrain rules, because I was like, you know what, if it's able to beat that, it's pretty balanced. My list was pretty balanced, I thought. So look, we walked away with the victory, had a great game, learned a lot. He was a very gracious player. You know, we both helped each other out where we could, and that was the second game. So let's move on to game 3 coming up next. So after game 2, which I think I skimmed over a little bit, like how I actually managed to win it, but essentially it was the Guardians that removed his big blobs, and I'd used the Shining Spears to go out and jump on those ITC objectives. And secondary wise, I'd taken old school, so I managed to get first strike, I managed to get last strike. I don't think I did get his Warlord actually, according to this anyway. I did get Recon, which is pretty much what I took every single mission, and I got Reaper as well, because of course Reaper is a great one to take against him with those big, they're over 20 models, and you get 2 points for destroying a blob of 20 models or more, which is really cool. So, you know, if you guys don't know how the ITC missions work, the Championships missions, just go and download them from Frontline Gaming. And they're really cool, really good fun to play, but just be aware of the changes in the sort of the main rules, if you like, so that you can play it properly. But right, the third game was a really interesting one, and really cool. I really enjoyed it. This was a tough one. I knew it would be a tough one the minute I saw who it was that I was facing. So I faced Brett. Now Brett was actually the winner of the LVO last year, and in fact runner-up of the ITC in general. So you know, when you know, if someone wins a big major, you could go, okay, well, they've won a big major, they had the right list, they got the right luck that year, blah, blah, blah. But you're not just dealing with the winner of a major like the LVO, you're dealing with someone that was, you know, runner-up in the entire ITC league last year. So that immediately tells you this is nothing to do with luck. You're dealing with a very skilled player here, okay? Because these guys, you know, the regular top 8 at the LVO and so forth, are all exceptionally skilled players because they regularly finish at the top tables, much like, you know, ETC players do, or any of the regular tournament top heavy hitters, if you like, here in the UK and Europe. So we played scenario 3 Nexus controls, so we got 4 objectives. Now Brett, very cerebral player, and by cerebral I mean he thinks about everything, and I'm like that as well. You know, when our deployment phase was, I think, beautiful. It was so good. You know, it was like we were both very aware of what each other were doing, and I think like the game was on straight away. You know, and you got two people just immediately go, right, okay, well, how's he going to be as a player? How will the army play against this? What will he do to counter this? How well does he know my army, etc., etc. And we had a really good game. That was actually, it was so much fun. I've got up some pictures here of it, of how he deployed. He had a Chaos Soup list. You know, a big unit of burn flamers, Zinch flamers, which are really good. They're auto hitting. Cultist bomb, of course, Mark of Slanesh, the standard sort of jazz. He had mortar teams, renegades mortar teams, which again are really, really good in ITC because they don't require line of sight, can hide, you know, in the ground floor of a ruin, and then they can sort of, you know, hopefully near an objective, right, where they can just gather you more points, and they can just lob you with their mortars. So I knew that they needed to be dealt with very quickly. He didn't have, other than that, really a tremendous amount of firepower. He sort of relied on his cultist bomb. He relied on his mortar teams. But look, that was the crux of the list. He obviously had a combat element as well. I think, now I'm trying to remember, did he actually have a bloodletter bomb as well? I don't think he did, actually. But anyway, regardless, you've got the crux of the list. I'll put some pictures up on the screen. You can see how I deployed. I used my Guardians in a big arc semicircle there to prevent an anti-drop zone, if you like. He used lots of Nurglings to sit out on the first turn objectives and create an anti-drop zone, which he did beautifully, masterfully. You know, he's a brilliant player. Really brilliant player. He created, his deployments was done in such a way that it was impossible for me to deploy either of my 20-man Guardian blobs anywhere in his half of the table, you know. And when someone deploys that, like, you know, you're dealing with someone that's good. They know what they're doing. And so, you know, I had to hold my Guardians back a bit. So we played, we've got a couple of turns in. And as it turned out, I managed to move forward with the Hemlocks and delete his mortars. 2 units of them in the first turn. That got me a couple of kills. Plus I moved out with the Shining Spears, which I've already sort of spoken about tactically. Got the first turn charge on a couple of Nurgling units, wipes them out, which was good. So I got loads of kills. So again, that sort of put me up in the ITC points of view, if you like, because he didn't kill as much in his first turn. Then the culmination of the game really came down to him unleashing his cultist bomb on me, shooting up a bunch of stuff. He killed some Guardians, killed a lot of Guardians. He killed a load of jet bikes. But he also got pretty unlucky, to be fair. I think he certainly didn't have the average luck that he needed to get the kills that he needed. And then I was able to counter with my own blob of Guardians, doom the cultist bomb, guide the Guardians, and just nukes them. And once he had lost that cultist bomb, plus I dealt with a lot of his combat elements as well, tied them up with Shining Spears and charge and so forth, he wasn't able to really get out and move on to the objectives. And because I'd gotten the ITC lead in terms of points in that first 2 turns, that first turn, where he wasn't really able to kill anything. So I held more objectives than him and I killed more than him. So I got that jump that I needed, right? He wasn't able to come back fast enough. And that's how it pretty much ended. It was very, very close. I won 16 points. He won 13 points. If the game had gone on, I'd pretty much broken the backbone of his force at that point, so he wasn't able to come back into it in a big way. But because he's a very good player, he could have maybe stolen it. Maybe if the turn had gone on, we got another turn in, he maybe would have been able to just pick me on a point or something. But if the game had played out to, like, say we didn't have any time limit, I think ultimately the Eldar would have just continued that momentum and then sort of ended the army. But, you know, look, a real pleasure playing him. Brilliant player, no doubt. We'll see each other at a future LVO. Maybe he'll give me a good hiding, then put me back in my place. But it was good, you know. It was a good game. It was a good way to end day 3. You know, playing someone that's is so notoriously good in the ITC as well. And, you know, it was good fun. Like, I finished day 1 on 3 wins, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. But I'd already got a couple of alarm bells at this point, because the thing which I hadn't done, because then when I finished the day, I was like, okay, I'm on 3 wins. This is good. I think I'm in the running to, you know, maybe I can get the top 8 this year. But then when I looked at the Best Coast Pairings app, where they show you all of the pairings, I was looking at the normal heavy hitters, if you like. The wins that were coming through, you know, were 30 points, 35 points, 40 points. You know, they were like 30 plus points. And my biggest win was like a 20 point, and I got a 16 point. And you know, that wasn't anywhere near enough. You can sneak in that way and just get a load of sort of average points. But what I wasn't getting was enough points, in my opinion, to get comfortably into that top 8. So I was like, this is interesting. And there was a couple of reasons for that, which I'll talk about at the end of this. But I was like, okay, I'm not so sure that what I've taken is working as well as it should be in these missions. So look, let's go over day 2. That's coming up next. So day 2, first game, played another awesome game. Really, really lovely guy, and he watches the show, and so like we were talking about that, and so we had a good chat, and it was nice. Like I was sitting down, he did his deployment, I casually set up. It was a nice way to start the day, and it was also inevitable because I was playing the Aeldari sort of Aeldar friends list, which you would expect to play at least once, or at least I thought I would expect to play at least once at the LVO, and this was the list. This was the Reaper spam list, if you like. So he basically was rocking 2 units of Wave Serpents, 1 big blob of Reapers, 10 man. I think he had 3 blobs of 3 units of 3, they're not blobs, Reapers. In addition to that, it may have been 4. I'm going to stick with 3. He had 3 units of Swooping Hawks, which are, very good horde clearance, and a whole bunch of Rangers, which is absolutely the right thing to do. He had a Vrain, the Cat Lady, to make sure his Reapers were a part of the Aeldari detachment. And he used his Rangers really, really well. So again, this is a bit like what Brett did. He deployed all of his Rangers in such a way, so again I hid my my Guardians in the webway. He deployed all of his Rangers in such a way as to ensure that he had complete board control in terms of his half of the board and his objective, because in this one there's only 2 objectives. Scenario 4, there's called What's Yours Is Mine. So you're really only fighting over your home objective and his objective, so it's really critical that you protect your own objective whilst having the flexibility to move out and get to the enemy objective as well. So he, again, deployed rather masterfully, used all of his Rangers to ensure I couldn't deep strike anywhere near his objective. It was just not possible, okay? But his only real anti-horde firepower were the Swooping Hawks, and his anti-tank firepower was the Reapers, which is a pretty common synergy. Use the Hawks for clearance, use the Reapers for anti-tank in older armies at the moment. Now, this game, because there were only the 2 objectives, and I really needed to go out to him, I don't think I got the right deployment type, because we ended up getting Vanguard, or rather, no, it is Vanguard, where we were corner to corner, and I needed to be able to get out over to him as quickly as possible. So I did front line all of my my Shining Spears, because I was like, right, I really need to get into his lines quickly, get rid of these Rangers, So my turn 1 sort of plan was, right, get rid of these Rangers. That will create myself a drop zone, if you like, move out into his lines, cause him a problem. And what actually ended up happening was I didn't get first turn. Now, I think in this particular game I really needed first turn, actually, because the deployment map was kind of against me, because I needed 2 turns to really get across. And I needed to get my Hemlocks out over to his Wave Serpents, because he ended up deploying his Wave Serpents, the Reapers in there, to open up the Wave Serpents and drop his, because he was hiding them behind in his corner of the board. He did use the Phantasm stratagem to then redeploy them, which was a great play. But I think I needed to open up the Wave Serpents with the Hemlocks, a combination of the Hemlocks and Shining Spears to try and charge them if need be, try and finish it off or whatever, and then had with his Reapers exposed on the ground, because I was so far back, that would have caused him issues with range and also issues with line of sight, because there were 2 big pieces of line of sight blocking terrain in the middle. So if I'd opened up the Reapers in his deployment zone, he wouldn't have been able to see me in his next turn, and then I would have had another turn to come in, because I've created a drop zone by that point with my Guardians to go and finish them off, and it would have worked well. But in that deployment, I didn't have first turn. I did get the +1 to go first, but I whiffed the roll and I didn't seize. He then moved out with his Reapers. He alpha struck me. What he did was he destroyed, in the end, I think he actually, funnily enough, he only did destroy the 1 Hemlock. He may have destroyed 2, but he definitely certainly destroyed 1 easily, comfortably in the first turn. And he killed a whole bunch of my Guardians with his Swooping Hawks that came down, but that wasn't really the issue. The biggest issue is that he had the board control. He also destroyed the majority of my Shining Spears. That's what he did. He destroyed one Hemlock and killed the majority of my Shining Spears with his Reapers, which is absolutely the right thing to do because he needed to take away that mobility that I had to move out and create my own drop zone, because that's what I needed. I needed to get out to him, but he chose target priority was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. So he got first turn. He needed first turn. He removed the majority of the Shining Spears. I think I had like 3 left, 3 or 4 left. He destroyed 2 units anyway. And that meant that when it came to my turn, he'd got all of these swooping hawks out there now, and he'd got all of the Reapers mid-board, which was tough. So all of a sudden, I had nowhere near enough options to deploy my actual Guardian bombs. And my 2 Hemlocks, they came through and they killed some Reapers, sure, you know, that's what happens. But the reality is that I just couldn't get my Guardians anywhere near him by that point. And this is why that actually confirmed what I was, with some of the alarm bells I was having. It's like, right, I needed to change one aspect of my list to try and ensure that I could do certain things. So in the end, I came in with my Guardians. I killed a whole bunch of swooping hawks, but they were still sort of just in my deployment zone. The remaining unit of Shining Spears went and nuked some Reapers, but after they'd done that, you know, he's fallen back. He kills the rest of the Shining Spears in his next turn, just drops another Hemlock, kills a bunch of Guardians, and then I get another turn and I move out and I kill some more Hawks, you know. And look, I racked up 7 points, you know. I did get old school for 3 points. And I did hold an objective and kill a unit every turn, all that sort of jazz. But ultimately, it was an uphill struggle. There was no way I was going to get to him. And he had the ability to absolutely continue pushing forwards because he had all of the middle board controlled. And then because he had, I think he had 5 units of Rangers. So he had really great board control. So that really prevented my my Guardians from striking in completely. So his objective was completely shut down and he was able to move forward with his swooping hawks and eventually come and try and take my objective and just continue. He actually ended up sitting the Reapers in one of the middle buildings at the top and just, you know, continue to nuke me with the Reapers. There wasn't really anything I could do. So we actually, again, we only got 2 turns, guys. That was all we got, you know. But if the game had gone on, I wasn't going to win it, you know. I needed first turn. I didn't get first turn. So it was just one of those things. And that is the first mistake, if you like, I think, in my army build that I took. And this was a matchup which sort of highlighted that weakness in my army, I think. So look, I was like, okay, great. Learned a lot from that. Let's move on to the next game. So then it was game, so I knew I was out of the running for top 8 at that point. So I was like, okay, cool. Let's see what I can do. So try and get a fun game in for the next one. And game 5, this was also a really fun game. So let's cover that. That's coming up next. So game 5, got to face my first Imperial army at the LVO. Beautifully painted, actually. Really an alternative Dark Angels scheme with an almost like an aqua green colour. It looked really good. He did a great job on painting them. And look, this was another good list, guys. You know, basically Hellblaster Castle with Azrael, who's amazing, and a Dark Shroud for the invulnerable save, and a Chapter Ancient so that they can fire again, you know, potentially if they die. Aggressors, creating a really, really, really good defense for that castle. And he castled up in the corner, you know, created a really, really good good blob around his objective. And it was a tough one to try and crack that. But ultimately, the Hemlocks, they moved in turn 1, and because of that strength 12, flat damage 2, even against his, you know, against all of his Hellblasters, and even with things like, well, the Dark Shroud was ignored because I'm auto hitting anyway, so that was another advantage of the Hemlocks. And then smites were going off and everything. I basically managed to nuke a whole bunch of his Hellblasters. And I think he had something like 25 Hellblasters. They had a lot of them in turn 1. Nuked a whole load of those. Shining Spears came up. He actually completely obliterated 1 unit of Shining Spears just with the Overwatch with the aggressors. My goodness, did they kick out a lot of firepower. But then I was able to actually get in with another unit, and that caused him some problems. Started killing aggressors that way. Guardian Blobs came in mid-board, shot into the castle, removed his scouts, and I was sitting I had one unit Shining Spears go up the left flank holding that objective. So I pretty much throughout the entire, all of the turns, I held the middle objective, I held the objective on the left, and I was killing. So he had a couple of those cheap scout units. So I was able to get more kills than him every turn as well. And ultimately, yeah, I racked up the points against him. So what ended up happening was he did destroy 2 Hemlocks in the end, because obviously some Hellblasters did survive. But I managed to rack up 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yeah, 15 points. And I think he had something like 9 points, something like that in the end. So, you know, it was a comfortable win. Again, we only got 2 turns. Just that's what happened. You know, no one was, you know, neither of us were playing slowly. It's just, that's what happened. I think partly he had some psychers. And again, I'll talk about this at the end of the Voxcast. You know, he had psychic, I had psychic. I was running a pretty large army. You know, 60 models to move every turn is not always the most fun. And the deployment took quite a bit of time. We actually started this game a little bit late because the BCP pairing app was. We didn't get the pairings on just for us. The BCP pairing app was working great. It's just for some reason there was one issue with like, am I pairing, our pairing? And so we were waiting for it to be paired. And we were like one of the last to get paired is basically what happened. So I think we lost maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes of gameplay. But you know, look, that's cool. There was no issue there. We could see how the game would have gone, I think, if the game had gone on turn-wise anyway. And we had a lot of fun, so that was the most important thing. So that was game 5. So time to cover game 6. So game 6 played my third, actually, technically speaking, Chaos Soup. So Chaos were, you know, pretty popular there of the event. Played another very good player. Basically, list-wise, he had the Alpha Legion Cultist bomb, you know, some smaller units of Cultists to help protect his deployment zone. He had Magnus this time instead of Mortarion, so it was a different twist on things. And at the time of the LVO, they were using the rules for the old Magnus, not the new ones in the new Thousand Suns Codex, so he could reroll 1s on his saves and so forth, and was a bit cheaper, which is good. And then he also took 2 Fire Raptors, which are amazing. They're basically like Storm Ravens, but better. Lots of anti-infantry firepower and so forth. And he had Nurgling bases, and he also had a Bloodletter bomb as well. Now again, like the first Chaos Soup army I played, the army in many respects was based on the same premise, except instead of Obliterators, he had the Fire Raptors, and instead of Mortarion, he had Magnus. But everything else is pretty much, you know, what you would expect. Now, look, very good army. This time I didn't get first turn, okay? And his Fire Raptors came in, and they basically nuked one of the, 2 of the Hemlocks, in fact, and that was it, really. Magnus wasn't really in charge range first turn. He wasn't in charge range first turn because of our deployment that we picked. Or that we rolled up for, and even with warp time he couldn't quite make it. His Cultist bomb came in, started trying to kill my initial Guardian Screen, but again he had deployed so well that I couldn't get my own bombs, you know, in against him. So to get to his sort of home objective, if you like. So again, I was kind of hemmed in, because that's the problem against these style lists. If you don't have, I mean, at top level competitive play now, it's about board control, okay? And if you don't have enough board control yourself and you lose first turn, they move out and then just sort of swarm the board, and you've got really nowhere to go. So you're sort of boxed in. Now, as it turned out, it didn't matter too much. I was kind of able to get away with it in a way, because I came in with one of my blobs. I actually saved one of my blobs. I came in with one of my blobs, and I managed to jinx Magnus despite his additional denial. So I saved a command reroll to ensure that I got the max. I think I rolled an 11 or something. So I got jinx off. So he had a -1 to his save all of a sudden. I also got Doom off, and I had Eldrad managed to get Guide off as well on the Guardian Blob. And basically the Guardian Blob came in and rinsed Magnus. It took like 15 wounds from him. Didn't kill him in that turn though. And then the next turn, unfortunately, because Magnus was still alive, he came in, nuked nuked the Guardian bomb, and his cultist bomb finished off the majority of the Guardians in my deployment zone. And then what I managed to do was counter with my Guardians, who nuked maybe about 20, because I couldn't quite get all in range, maybe about 20 of his cultists. But he had Tide of Traitors, so he could bring them back in, and I just didn't have enough bodies left on the ground to successfully finish them off. His Bloodletter bomb came in, and he was actually really unlucky here. He failed the charge. Just failed the charge. And even with a command reroll, he rolled like 2 2s and a 3. You're like, oh, okay. You know, that was what happened. But yeah, he failed the charge, so he couldn't sort of get on one side of my flank. My other cultist Guardian bomb came in over there and nuked them, just completely obliterated them. Shining Spears went over there. I got unlucky on a couple of really clutch things, like killing Nurglings on a base to hold one more objective than him. So I lost out on holding more objectives than him based on just he got lucky on the saves for the Nurglings. Basically, I forced like 5 saves with these damage 2 lances, and he made 4 or 5 ups. You know, if that happens, right? But otherwise, he only had like 1 base left. He would have died. But and which would have actually changed the scoring of the game. I would have actually had more points at that point. So in the end, you know, ultimately, I needed first turn. Could I have won it? Yes, I could have stolen the game despite that if I'd gotten the luck where I needed. But if the game had played out in its full length, I still think I would have lost. And ultimately, because I didn't have the maneuverability after he had come in and alpha struck me, because he had destroyed, in addition to those 2 Hemlocks, he had also destroyed, I think he destroyed 6 Shining Spears in total. He destroyed 1 unit and he took 1 from another. And all of a sudden, that's a big blow off of my counter strike and my fast units, the assault units that need to get out into his lines. So a bit like the first game of where I played the Elder and they did the same thing to me. It was like, it was hard to recover from it. So in the end, I think the points, I didn't actually put his points down, but it was something like, I got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's double check this so that we're accurate. I got, it's precious cargo. Yeah, look, I got something like 8 points, something like that, something really low. I haven't even finished writing it down here. We only got the couple of turns in anyway. And he got something like 14 points or something like that. But look, congratulations to him. You know, good victory. He did the right things. Good target priority. Much like the Elder player at the beginning of day 2. And that was all 6 games. And you know what? Looking back at it now, it was a lot of fun. You know, I enjoyed all of the games I played. I learned a tremendous amount. The key things that, to me, that I really learned though, was in a way, not so much about my army, although I did do some takeaways from my army. I'm still actually quite happy with the army, but really more the ITC missions themselves. So let's talk about the ITC missions properly now, specifically about the whole format and the LVO itself, because I've had lots of questions from you guys. I know a lot of people were messaging me, emailing me as well, asking about the rounds that the games went on and how many turns we got and everything like that. I've got some, I can talk about that. I've got some opinions on it. But yeah, look, let's cover all of that. That's coming up next. So guys, let's cover the ITC missions and why I think that ultimately the army that I took didn't quite play well enough, in my opinion, to fulfill or to maximize the points I could get, if you like, from the ITC missions. Basically, the theme on all of the missions is generally the same. Did you kill a unit? Did you hold an objective? Did you kill more units? Did you hold more objectives? And then picking the right secondary objectives to go with your army, depending on what you're facing, right? But ultimately, my army failed in a couple of respects. And I think that the first respect was board control. I needed more of it against the armies that had greater board control than I did. In the 2 games that I lost, I needed to go first, and the reason I needed to go first is because I needed to have the board control to create my own drop zone and get that mid-board covered. Without it, they got to do the drop on me and hem me in and really provide me very few options with my Guardian bombs, which are like my alpha units, if you like. So the way I would fix that initially, let's just cover the fixing of the Elder first, is I'll drop 1 blob of 20 Guardians. I'd add in 2 units of Rangers. That also saves me some points to get the Cat Lady and increase the unit size of the Shining Spears. So that's what you would do. okay? And I think all of a sudden then I'm not reliant on first turn, I don't care. I know that I'm definitely going to have a drop zone available for my 2 Guardian blobs that would come in, and it would be a game changer, you know, for the army. I think that's how I'd tweak it. The other thing though, and this is something which, you know, is harder to work out, is the army didn't play fast enough to get through enough turns, to rack up enough points to comfortably do well in the ITC Championships missions. Because the great thing about the ITC Championships missions is that if you don't play that many turns, you know, if you're a slow player or whatever, it punishes you for it, because you don't accrue enough points, right? And that's a great thing, because it should absolutely be encouraging you to get as many turns in as possible. Generally speaking, at any tournament I've ever been to, it's always a struggle to finish the game, because, you know, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 2 hours 15, some do 2 hours 45 minutes. You know, generally it's always tough to get all of the turns in unless you're playing an army which is deliberately designed to be fast. Either that, or you are a very, very fast player and you know your army so well, and you know your opponent's army so well. Because a lot of what happens at events is you play a player who doesn't know your army very well, or, you know, or you play a player and you don't know their army very well. So you're going to spend the time at the beginning during the deployment saying, well, what does that do? What does that do? What does that do? So, you know, you're talking, you do your meet and greet and everything. And in an ITC specific championships missions, you've got to pick all your secondary missions. Now, if you're very experienced, you're going to know what secondaries to pick very quickly, because you know the type of army you're facing. You just go bam, 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 that's what I'm taking, which is pretty much what I was able to do after like 2 games there. You know, that was because going to the LVO, I'd only played 2 of the championships missions, which was nowhere near enough experience, and I wouldn't have been caught out with things like the terrain and what secondaries and all of that sort of jazz. I wasn't experienced enough in the missions this year, but next year I will be, because assuming they keep this format the entire time. But, you know, after 2 games, I pretty much knew what secondaries I was taking all the time. It was you know, fairly obvious. But the other issue is that when you're doing the admin at a tournament, you know, from your last round, you've got to tally up all of the points. You've got to make sure they're correct, you know, verify it with your opponent. Then you've got to, you know, put them in the entry. Then you've got to wait for your next pairing. And all the while this is happening, you know, people's armies these days are bigger. And this is sort of leading to my second point. Does 8th edition overall play faster than 7th? Well, I think yes, if you're just taking, like, if you're comparing a 7th edition army to an 8th edition army, and that, like, if you took a 7th edition army in 8th edition, probably would play faster. But the reality is that the meta's changed so much, and what we've got in 8th edition now is actually a heavy assault element with heavy psychic was always a thing anyway, but they've got a heavy psychic influence in terms of buffing and synergy. And because of the heavy assault element, which is actually compounded by the fact that in order to do competitive armies these days, you almost always have blob units, okay? So you've got a much higher model count on average than you had before. You know, gone are the days of things like a Riptide Wing. You know, we're dealing with 60 plus models now, you know, 40 cultists, sometimes then 30 bloodletters as well, or 90 plague bearers, or in my instance, 60 guardians, you know, because that's what you need to do to create the board control and have the weight of dice required. But if you're rolling more dice, you're moving more models, and you're doing assault phases, which in 7th edition was actually primarily a shooting-based meta. It wasn't an assault-based meta. The only assault units were basically psychic Death Stars. And when they did the assault, they killed whatever they attacked. So there wasn't really an interaction, so it was actually still faster. Because now what you've got is like a big grinding assault. You go, okay, well, 30 bloodletters against 30 plague bearers, or, you know, or the 40 cultists now have feel no pain because they've got the Slanesh sorcerer that's cast the power on them, right? So all of a sudden you're making all of these additional saves, you're rolling all of these additional dice. If you're doing an assault phase, big blobs against each other, all of a sudden I've got to roll all of the dice in my turn, and my opponent rolls all of the dice in my turn, and then we get to their turn, we then do the assault phase again. Assault heavy armies always play longer anyway, and the meta is shifted towards, in my opinion, guys, having a heavier assault element. So as a result, on average, the games do not play as quickly. And I kind of can see that as well, just in producing battle reports for you guys, because I can see the length of time, you know, that a battle report takes to film has gone up since 7th edition, because the armies that we're playing do have more of those assault elements. And as a result, you know, the length time, the average length time of a battle report, even if I removed the list analysis at the beginning, the actual battle report itself is longer. It's more footage, right? And that's when you're getting the edited version, where I clip, you know, top and tail everything, you know, in between. So inevitably, what does that mean in a tournament scenario? It means you're not going to get as many turns. You know, it's as simple as that. You can push, and I think if I pushed to super speed with my army, you know, maybe I could have averaged 3 turns. I think it would have been a real struggle to get the 4th turn. None of my opponents were slow. I wasn't slow. It was what it was. You know, you pack your army, you unpack your army. There were a couple of issues where I had to, you know, wait for a pairing and so forth. And so you'd be a bit late getting to the table. Your opponent would be a bit late getting to the table. But that's kind of out of anyone's control. You know, these things happen. So in terms of the actual, because I got loads of messages about this, so I thought I'd talk about it as well, guys. So in terms of the actual event itself, I thought the event went really well. You know, the frontline game did an amazing job. The tables looked incredible, plenty of terrain. And I had 6 great games. You know, it was a tremendous amount of fun. The only thing, if people, and so to address the messages that I got about, you know, how many turns that were people getting, and I know that there was some talk about people that were watching the live stream games where people only got a couple of turns. Personally, it's not fair for me to comment, because I didn't watch the live stream games because I was actually there playing. But if that's true, if they only got a couple of turns, it would be for all of the reasons that I've stated before. You know, it takes a while. You know, you set up the army, work out what the opponent's doing with their secondaries and doing all of the admin, and then when it happens, and usually the assault kicks off, you know, you're rolling the dice, and all of a sudden the time's gone. But ultimately, I think, you know, there's nothing anyone can do about it, guys, bar dropping the points. You know, if you want to play the game faster, but also you just need to reduce the model count a bit. But I know that would be a shame, because everyone wants to bring more toys. I want to bring more toys. So there it is. So in summary, an amazing event, an amazing time. I think the only thing that I would do differently, other than the actual changes to that Elder list, is in order to maximize your scoring potential, if you like, in the ITC Championships missions, is probably take an army which was either a lesser model count, but you can't really do that because you need the board control, or an army which can play out very, very quickly, to guarantee that you can get a minimum of 4 or 5 turns. I think ultimately the Elder army played a little bit too slowly for my liking, to maximize those points. And I think even if I dropped 1 Guardian Blob with the 2 units of Rangers, because then all of a sudden with the Aeldari element, you're getting like another turn. So you go, okay, well, I'm going to shoot in the psychic phase now, and then I'm going to charge again in the assault phase. So you end up sort of taking up more time. So I think, yeah, to try and design an army, I'd have to have a think about what I would do specifically for the ITC Championships missions. But I'd try and design an army which, yeah, I could play with faster. I mean, things like demons are quite good at it, because they often don't have the shooting element. You've got the assault element, but at least you're eliminating an entire phase. So you just go, right, move, bit of psychic, done. And then move, psychic, assault, you know. So you do something like that where you can sort of skim down the length of your turn. So, you know, there are some ways of doing it. And obviously there are guys which were smashing out 5, 6 turns, I'm sure. You know, they knew what they were doing, which is absolutely fine. So, guys, that is this Voxcast done. If you stuck with me this whole way, well done. You know, it was a great experience. I hope to see you guys next year at the LVO. I'm currently determined to return again, hopefully next year, with my beloved Drakari, because they should have a codex. I was so sad that they didn't have a codex before this year's LVO, because I'd love to have taken them, but there was no way I could take a Dark Elder Drakari to the LVO. You need the stratagems, guys. You need the stratagems. So, hope you've enjoyed this one. No doubt would be another Voxcast and other tournaments. Probably, in fact, the next one will be No Retreat that I do. Got No Retreat 6 coming up, which will be awesome. And then after that, I've also got the official Games Workshop finals, and that's going to be a lot of fun as well. So I'll do Voxcasts for those, so you've got that to look forward to too. So until next time, folks, this has been The Spider. I'll see you soon.